The Oracle Network. Look deeper.
We have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the warehouse.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked. I've been shot. 1692 means we got shots fired. 4:15 at the Route 91. Sounded like an automatic firearm.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Thank you for listening.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Standoff in Herkimer continues at this hour after a deadly shooting spree there today. Herkimer is about 80 miles west of Albany. Police say this man is responsible for setting fire to his home and then going on that shooting spree at two businesses, killing 4 people earlier today. Our Pat Bailey has more tonight from Herkimer.
State police continue to surround an abandoned building here in the village of Herkimer. They've been doing so for about 7 hours now. They say they are confident they have the suspect contained to this building. This standoff, as we said, been going on for about 7 hours, and it is the end-all be-all of a completely hectic and painful day for many residents here in Herkimer County.
The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the noun motive as something, such as a need or desire, that causes a person to act. In prior episodes, we have spoken in depth about the different motives that drive a shooter to take many innocent lives. Usually, after an investigation, we will know why a shooter made the decisions they had made. Today's episode is quite a bit different. However, the shooter we will cover today lived a very simple life. He lived in a small apartment in the rear of an old brick building, didn't have any savings or a job, and had maxed out all of his credit cards. He had few, if any, friends or family in the area, and rarely even left his apartment, aside from going down to the local bar for a light beer. It didn't appear that he had an alcohol problem of any kind. He would simply come into the side street bar, order his beer, drink his cold beverage, and leave. Sometimes, even after an investigation, we will never know the reason why, or the motive behind a person taking multiple innocent lives. Today is one of those stories. It has been 7 years since this shooting occurred, and to this day, we still don't have a reason why the shooter committed this brutal mass murder. Active Shooter the podcast is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the No Notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge in not naming the shooter by their actual name. We will refer to today's shooter as Daryl. Upstate New York in March is cold. Winter hasn't quite yet turned to spring, yet the weather was starting to warm up, and the average temperature most days was around 40 degrees. March 13th and 14th, 2013, were chilly, cloudy days, but around the average temps of low 40s. The gloomy days were an appropriate backdrop for Daryl's terror and devastation, shooting and killing 4 people and a police canine dog. Many others were injured during Daryl's rampage that lasted nearly 2 full days.
Well, this is devastating. It's devastating to any community. I don't care if you're New York City or if you're a little place like this, but you don't expect it in a place like this.
64-year-old Daryl began his day in Mohawk, New York, which is located in Herkimer County. His plans that day included a trip to the barber shop and oil change shop, yet these trips weren't for the usual reasons. No, these trips were planned with malice and meant to destroy human lives. At 9:29 a.m., a 911 call was placed as Daryl quickly left the apartment he just lit on fire. The apartment building, located at 32 South Washington Street, Mohawk, New York, was situated directly across the street from the police and fire departments, making the response time fast.
Structure fire, 32 South Washington Street in the village of Mohawk. Repeating, Herkimer County to Mohawk and East Herkimer structure fire, 32 South Washington Street in the village, 9:30.
The fire was efficiently put out approximately 90 minutes later. After setting fire to the apartment, Daryl drove his vehicle, a red Jeep, to John's barber shop in downtown Mohawk. John Seymour, the proud owner of the barber shop, had just taken the cape off a client, Harry Montgomery. He was wrapping up Harry's haircut when Daryl walked in and asked John if he, quote, remembered him. John replied that he did and asked Daryl how he was. Daryl didn't answer. Instead, he raised a gun, which John initially believed was an umbrella, with a smirk on his face, as if Daryl knew what he was doing and was happy about it. John yelled, "He has a gun and is going to kill us. And this is real," as Daryl opened fire.
It was just getting through with Harry's hair, and then he came in. And then Harry was getting out of the chair, and he said, "Do you remember me? You're going to remember me." And then he shot us. And the rest is history.
Harry Montgomery fell on top of John, who vividly recalled a TV interview he'd seen before about a young shooting victim who said she survived the shooting by playing dead. He laid perfectly still and pretended to be dead. John was shot through the left wrist, blasting apart his watch and striking his back, but he was still alive. Sadly, John's customers, Harry Montgomery and Michael Rancier, were killed.
I remember hitting the ground and saying the Lord's Prayer. I remember that. And then it was, the gunshots were very, very loud, and the smoke, in that little barber shop, of course.
Additionally, Dan Haslauer, another customer waiting for his turn in the barber's chair, was shot. Amazingly, the bullet that went through his abdomen didn't kill Dan. It turns out Daryl was a former customer, but John estimated he hadn't been in the shop in about 8 years, so it's not entirely clear why Daryl singled out this business. Later, John recalled that the song "Life's Been Good" by Joe Walsh was playing on the radio when Daryl walked into his shop and changed multiple lives, forever.
Back EMS 17 West Main Street, Village of Mohawk, the barber shop. We have 2 men down, possible explosion, 9:35.
After the barber shop, Daryl went to Gaffey's Quick Lube and Car Wash at 320 Mohawk Street in Herkimer. While it was considered a different town, the Quick Lube was only about a mile away from the barber shop. Immediately upon arriving at Gaffey's, Daryl once again raised his gun and opened fire, instantly killing 2 people, Thomas Stefka and Michael Renshaw. The whole incident at Gaffey's was so fast, it didn't appear that any words were spoken or exchanged.
318 Mohawk Street, repeating to Herkimer, Movac, and Rural Metro. Stage for law enforcement. We have 2 males down. 318 Mohawk Street, Gaffney's car wreck. Flash. 940.
Daryl got back into his car and drove, abandoning his vehicle in an alley near the Herkimer County Library, about a half-mile from the car wash. Daryl then withdrew into an abandoned bar that was formerly called Glory Days. In all, the shooting spree lasted about 10 minutes before Daryl retreated to the bar. It didn't take long for police to arrive in droves, and at approximately 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday, March 13th, Gunshots were heard from the abandoned bar, and police were heard attempting to communicate with Daryl. At about 2:30 p.m., more shots could be heard, and 2 vehicles outside of the building were observed to have bullet holes in them.
Regarding the shots fired, what location are they calling in from?
Over here!
Get away! Get back! Get back! All the way back! Get back! Get inside! Get all the way down! Keep going! Next street! Route 5! Keep going! Keep going!
Communications with Daryl and negotiations resumed at 3:20 p.m. No one knew it at the time, but this standoff would last for the rest of that day, overnight, and into the early morning hours. There was a heavy police presence, and armored vehicles swarmed the area. Around 3:35 p.m., police used bolt cutters to gain access into the 3-story building. Yet they didn't go in. Instead, police used robots and tear gas to lure Daryl out of the building since they believed him to be alive. At 6:30 p.m., snipers perched on nearby buildings' roofs could be seen coming off the rooftops. 20 minutes later, large lights were set up outside the building, positioned to face the empty building that Daryl was stowed away. The reason police brought in extra lighting is because officers rightfully assumed this standoff was going to go well into the night, and they needed light to see. Simultaneously to the lights being installed, at 6:50 p.m., a different group of snipers could be observed climbing onto the roofs. They were there as a relief for the previous snipers.
And a whole bunch of the SWAT team came out of Glory Days. And then once they came out of Glory Days, they wandered into visors. And then about 7 or 8 cop cars with their lights on came down and then went down into the alleys. And they told us, just get back, get out of here.
The following morning, Tuesday, March 14th, at about 8:22 a.m., officers decided that it was time to send a tactical FBI canine into the building. As soon as they did, Daryl fired at the canine, killing the dog. Because the canine is considered an officer of the law, police shot back and ultimately killed Daryl. Ape, the canine dog, was also killed in the line of duty.
Building 248 North Main. 2 shots fired from the building.
There is no known motive or reason for this tragic incident. Not that mass shootings can ever be justified, but this particular event was just so senseless. No manifesto or note was left behind. While further investigation would provide some possible clues, there was never anything definitive to reason away this devastating murder of innocent people who were performing ordinary errands on a regular day. The New York State police officers, local city police officers, and even the FBI responded to the scene and withstood an 18-hour standoff with a madman. In response to multiple shooting sites, local schools of all levels, including Herkimer and Mohawk Public Schools and Herkimer Community College, were put on lockdown and ultimately closed for that day. Stores and businesses surrounding the abandoned bar also went into lockdown mode. Nearby residents were instructed to stay inside their homes. No one was allowed to come or go. Families were separated. The local courthouse was put on lockdown too, although the courthouse staff was escorted out the back door to safety after 3 hours. Many of the stores downtown have small apartments above the actual business space, and those residents were advised to stay put until the situation was resolved.
After we heard what went on, we came outside, and about maybe half hour later, there was fresh blood on the sidewalk and also on the roadway and a large clump of hair.
The abandoned bar was extremely disorganized and messy, with tables, chairs, trash, and other miscellaneous items lying about. The police and investigators extensively searched the area for hours before hearing gunshots at the old bar, which is how police were able to find Daryl when he was hiding.